At its peak, there were over 1,500 active Georgia shrimpers. Today, there are only about 200. Where have our shrimpers gone? The year was 2013. Georgia shrimpers were looking forward to a bumper fall shrimp season. Prices for shrimp that year were sky high, 3 times the usual price. In anticipation, shrimpers invested in what they hoped would be a record harvest. They upgraded their equipment, fixed their boats and nets, hired extra crew, and then the unthinkable happened. You could say a perfect storm. That year, there were so few shrimp to catch that they lost money just on their fuel costs and were idled. Many went bankrupt or quit. The 2013 Georgia shrimp season was declared a federal disaster. What happened? I think the answer has to do with the connections between ourselves and the natural world. Our story begins with our climate. There can be no denying that our climate is changing. The vast majority of expert climate scientists, backed by reams of data, agree our climate is changing rapidly. Here in coastal Georgia, and unfortunately for shrimp, our winters have gotten warmer. Of course, there's a lot of variability from year to year, but the trend is clear. Over the past 20 years, we've seen a warming of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius in our winter water temperatures. Interestingly, no other season has really changed. It's just the winter. So why are warmer winters unfortunate for shrimp? This is why. This is a shrimp suffering from a condition called blackgill. For reference, here's an image of a shrimp with blackgill and one without. Shrimp with blackgill struggle to breathe. Think of a coal miner with black lung disease or a tobacco smoker with emphysema. Of course, shrimp don't have lungs like we do, but their gills function to allow them to breathe in the water, just like our lungs allow us to breathe in the air. Blackgill hurts shrimp. As one shrimper, Captain George McKenzie, told me, blackgill is killing shrimp, and when it's out there, there aren't a lot of them to catch. And the surprising connection, blackgill turns out to be a consequence of climate change. The effects of climate change that we will have to adapt to won't only be the obvious ones, like temperature and sea level rise, but also less obvious ones, like shrimp blackgill. It is these less obvious connections that will be the most difficult to anticipate and to adapt to. Although the symptoms of blackgill are well known, lots of things can cause blackgill. And here in Georgia, the cause was a mystery. What you're looking at here, the result of nearly a decade of research, is the culprit. This is a thin slice of shrimp gill tissue under a microscope from a shrimp with blackgill. Most of the tissue is healthy, but if you look at the edges, you'll notice those round purplish objects, smaller than a speck of dust. That is not shrimp tissue. Those are parasites. And notice how the tissue around the parasites is darkened. The cause of blackgill turned out to be a previously unknown single-celled animal called a ciliate that parasitizes shrimp and feeds off of living gill tissue. The darkened tissue is actually a result of the shrimp's immune system fighting off the infection. This is a close-up of the parasite under an electron microscope. It's attached to gill tissue and gorging itself. We had the honor of naming it Halephysa lanai after an important ciliate expert, Dennis Lin, who had recently died. Actually, it's not that unusual to discover new microbes. The diversity of microbial life on our planet is so high, and we know so little. This parasite has likely always been in Georgia and was triggered by our warming temperatures, by climate change. We're still working out the mechanisms of how blackgill affects shrimp, but we know this. Since blackgill has been prevalent, shrimp harvests in Georgia have been down and related to warmer winters. The warmer the winter, the poorer the harvest. While we were busy in the laboratory, the problem has gotten worse. Blackgill, it's still an epidemic off of our coast, but now also in the Gulf of Mexico. It's present from Florida up to the Chesapeake Bay, maybe beyond. It's an epidemic that, like our climate, is getting worse. And the surprising connection? A seemingly insignificant, microscopic creature that we didn't even know about because of our climate is impacting real people's lives. If we had begun research on blackgill back in the 1980s when shrimpers first began noticing it, or in the 1990s when managers first officially acknowledged it, it might not be a crisis today. It took a major crisis, at least a decade after the problem was first noticed, to motivate an effort to act. We don't understand the connections well enough between ourselves, the living resources that we depend on, and our planet that supports them. The changing climate resulted in an epidemic of blackgill, and Georgia shrimpers and shrimp lovers are being forced to adapt. There will be many, many other difficult-to-predict connections. So what can we do? First, learn. We're all connected, and we depend on healthy ecosystems. We need to educate ourselves about climate change and share what we learn with our family, friends, our leaders, and communities. Second, adapt. For example, some shrimpers are diversifying their fishing practices and exploring harvesting other products, like cannonball jellyfish. Did you know that jellyfish are an essential menu item at a traditional Chinese wedding? Let's not let what happened to shrimpers happen again. Let's identify our vulnerabilities and be willing to diversify our practices. And finally, act. Doing science, good science, is often a drawn-out process. It's not like an episode of Star Trek or CSI where problems are solved in an hour. We need to think long-term and broadly. This does not mean doing nothing. It means acting on the best available information. We can pay attention to those clues and work to identify those connections, make changes in those connections at the smallest level, like the connections between Halephysa lanai and our Georgia shrimp. Recognizing our connectedness will bring a better tomorrow for Georgia shrimpers, for our coastal waters and the organisms that live in them, and for all of us.